Skip, a lot of churches will look around to see who might be people who would want to be involved, passionately involved in their youth groups. And a lot of times people consider having parents be involved. What do you think the advantages and what are some disadvantages to having parents involved?
There are advantages. There may be disadvantages. There's not necessarily an advantage or disadvantage to any individual hire, but I would say the advantages include the kind of advantages we've talked about for alums of your youth group, kids who've grown up in your church, or young adults or adults in your community. The parent will be invested in the church, will know the culture, will be likely to be a prospective, enduring presence in the young people's lives, will bring an intergenerational connection in the church itself, will have the ability to relate to other parents rather easily as a peer instead of the young person from outside the church that is viewed as simply an employee. Right. They'll know the culture and the teaching ministries of the church. They're also likely to know the kids themselves. And those are all important advantages to the prospect of hiring a parent. I wouldn't say there's any baked-in disadvantage that's necessarily applicable in any situation, but there are some markers to look out for. You don't particularly want a parent who doesn't have a calling for youth ministry. A parent that's just filling it as an obligation may be the best you can do, but the lack of passion and calling creates a limitation or a cap on their effectiveness. You don't particularly want a parent who has the wrong motivation. Not necessarily bad motivations, but I've always wanted to hang out with kids. I've got a little Peter Pan thing that I'm still a young person and I feel really jazzed when I hang out with the young people. No one's ever really recognized my gifts as a leader or a shaper of an institution. And most people don't see those gifts, so I don't get those jobs. But in the church where they can't find a youth minister, I can just kind of install myself as the only person who'll do it and then boss the kids around to realize and self-actualize my ideas of leadership. And then there's worse than that, where people have some motivations which really aren't healthy. Whatever the motivations, you then also have the question of, what about when they have a child in the group? Or what about when they're well known as a parent to the group? There's a real tension in youth ministry between the plain advantages and strengths of multi-generational youth ministry, where the kids are well integrated into the church and they have access to adults other than their parents who can be their mentors. This is an invaluable strength to a youth ministry. But there's also something to youth ministry where Patricia Hirsch called it being a tribe apart. There is a sense of, this is ours, we own this, and even though we're integrated into the church, however well, we have a sense that amongst us, we have some autonomy and some agency and a little space where we can more fully reveal who we are and be vulnerable than we can in school or in the larger context of the congregation. Having a parent there can create the risk of, well, I would have this conversation if it were a youth minister that I didn't have a connection to my mom, but I don't really feel comfortable with Mrs. Smith, who's just wired into my parents' social set. So there's a little bit of this, can I be as vulnerable and candid? So there are those strengths, but there's that potential limitation. And then there's the question of, what about the notion that you're hiring in to be the youth minister somebody who's got a child in the program? There's no avoiding this to some extent. I was a senior minister in town and a youth minister with 3 kids who grew up in the program. I don't think that was ideal for my kids. I think it would have been more comfortable for them if they'd had a youth minister other than their dad. So that's not necessarily avoidable, but it's something to think about. So I guess my summary is amazing possible strengths and advantages to hiring from among the parents' cadre. Some important questions of discernment that need to be brought to bear carefully.